My best. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure how a nerdy fascination with Dutch culture led to a thesis on our national security. Not being of Dutch heritage, Dutch-Canadian relations weren't exactly a foreseeable passion of mine. And yet, in studying the Netherlands, it has become a part of me, and it continues to be one of my greatest teachers. One of the most personal lessons that I've learned from this Dutch-Canadian project is that the discussion of ideas is of paramount importance. At a forum like TEDx, this statement isn't exactly bold or earth-shattering. We all believe this, it's why we're here today. So what I'm hoping to do is share with you a story that I think illustrates this importance from a slightly understated perspective, namely, how encouraging public dialogues on our most sensitive issues can keep us safe and requires participation and practice from us all. Well, like many stories worth hearing, this one begins in Amsterdam. 2 summers ago, my best friends and I, we schemed, dreamed, and saved our money to backpack through Western Europe for the last few weeks of the summer. And now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, students, Amsterdam, summer, Amsterdam, where is she going with this? But don't worry, there's only one really embarrassing detail that I have to reveal, and that's that I knew nothing about the Netherlands when I thought perhaps that I did. I arrived with those stock phrases and ideas of cheese, tulips, windmills, of those policing policies that are so liberal they border on the anarchic. I think what's ultimately at play when we think about the Netherlands in such terms is that the Dutch society is inherently liberal. Perhaps it is the only society that we may consider to be more open than our own. The reality, like the Canadian reality, of course, was much different on the ground. Circling amidst all of the cultural idioms and all of the wonderful things that make the Netherlands a sophisticated and compassionate country that we should look up to is also a difficult recent history, one which involves homegrown terrorism, radicalization, and the growth of an anti-immigration, anti-Islam party, which is currently part of the coalition government. As a history student, these inherent contradictions captivated my whole attention, and I wanted to know why and where these new flavors had come from. In the early 2000s, 2 political murders occurred which changed the face of Dutch society. The first was of populist politician Pim Fortuyn in 2002, followed by the murder of Theo van Gogh, a controversial filmmaker and columnist, in 2004. Equally eccentric and brazen, the men were friends who both gained their local fame off their assertions that they alone were willing to voice those things that the Dutch people were said to be secretly more worried about now in our post-9/11 order. The inference being immigration, integration, Islam, and the whole effect of Dutch multicultural policy on society. In 2002, 2 weeks before the national elections, Pim Fortuyn was murdered. And while it became clear that this was a politicized murder, it wasn't an act of terrorism, as was initially feared. Yet that distinction was lost following the killing of Theo van Gogh. The murders have since become referred to and remembered in the colloquial term Dutch 9/11. This tells us a lot about the effect the murders had, although what it does is it infers that both acts, while political, were both terrorist acts, and this is only true of the latter. While the men did have a select audience, their line of thinking was seen to be as inherently un-Dutch as we would consider it un-Canadian, until they were murdered. Death is a peculiar way of producing martyrdom in unlikely characters, and the men post-mortem came to be seen as the defenders of freedom of speech, of traditional liberal Holland. Almost overnight, the murder of Van Gogh broke the dam, if you will, on what could and would be said publicly in the Netherlands. And yet that there was this desire for a more public talk on sensitive issues, and particularly homegrown extremism at that time, this was only picked up and championed by one man with an unfortunately narrow and extreme perspective himself. Personally abrasive, arrogant, and yet to many charismatic, Geert Wilders is the Netherlands' most publicly outspoken critic of Islam to date. It is also worth mentioning that he has the world's worst blonde peroxide hairdo, and you may think that that's irrelevant, but I'm thinking it's a national security issue and something that I have no doubt they are looking at quite closely, or not perhaps closely. And I hope I can go back to Holland after I said that. In 2005, Wilders formed the PVV, which is the People's Freedom Party, which self-labels itself as the anti-immigration party that will get tough on the threat of Islam, mainly by removing it from the Netherlands altogether, as it's tied, in his mind, to extremism. The PVV has managed to normalize radical and unsubstantiated claims about what constitutes the national security threats. Yet the fault of this does not lie just with Wilders and his supporters. The responsibility and the lesson for us lies in the silence of the majority. The Dutch political parties of the left, the right, and the center all shied away first from engaging with Pim Fortuyn and Theo van Gogh, and then, more problematically, with Geert Wilders. The line of thinking seems to have been that by not engaging in these discussions of immigration and security and the likes would somehow make the issues fade, or skeptically, they would fade from electoral relevance. And this was a critical mistake. By not offering or formulating, articulating to the Dutch people other alternatives and other perspectives, the dialogue on these issues became grossly uninformed, narrow, one-sided, and yet it dominated the national discussion and media by the sheer of the power vacuum that was created through a lack of other voices. Certainly, voices in opposition to Wilders have always been there, and the Dutch are becoming increasingly savvy at dealing with this political storm. Yet the consequences of the dialogue's shaky beginning have already been real. To name a few, we've seen increased tolerance or support for the PVV's ideas, which I don't think we would have otherwise seen. A shaky coalition government, as the PVV, who's a member, as the third largest party, has the most to gain and the least to lose by being disruptive if its demands aren't met. And whilst not fully eclipsing the Netherlands' accomplishments, Wilders has certainly become a dark shadow over the country's national image abroad, now that the PVV has become more prominent in the media than ever before. And perhaps most troublesome from a traditional security perspective, Dutch intelligence reports indicate that the risk of extremism and political-related violence increases largely in relation to this national dialogue and the statements of the PVV and Wilders in particular, which are seen as arousing a lot of discontent and fostering frustration and anger at home. So why is this important? Security is not top-down. It is not determined in abstract by Dutch intelligence or Canadian intelligence. Security is all around us because it is us. It is our conversations because these influence our ideas and our ideas influence our actions. We often discuss radicalization as it relates to terrorism, but what we don't think a lot about is how the radicalization of our discussions can occur and the problems that this could create. The Dutch scenario reveals that if discussions of sensitive issues are suppressed, they are still likely to be taken up, but only by the most frustrated of perspectives. Even though they are not representative of a majority, if they appear as such, this can be highly polarizing for individuals, and this is unsafe. Why should we take this lesson to heart? Well, it wasn't too long ago that a country vehemently opposed to sensitive issues and discussions of those issues was descriptive of not just Canada, but of the Netherlands as well. As Canadians, I think we need to be careful and wary of labeling our sensitive discussions as somehow un-Canadian. I think this might be patently false. To be human is to be bound to others. We affect one another in ways that we may not intend to, and this is something that we must recognize. We affect one another's freedom. So our conversations then need to be held in view of our plurality and public interaction. Labeling discussions as un-Canadian, I think, will only ensure that they happen outside of view, likely only with concurring voices. And that, I think, is a national security issue. So how can we work to avoid the radicalization of the Canadian polity? By talking, and not just in monologue or with voices that we know already agree with us, by actively seeking out and engaging and listening to other perspectives. Tensions are deflated if we actively seek out the elephant in the room, and we don't wait until there is an international or domestic event that justifies its appearance. For evidence of this, we don't need to look far outside of the Ryerson community. The International Issues Discussion Series at Ryerson is a student-led forum which hopes to engage students and community members in thoughts of scholarly and moderate discourse on major international issues. Last fall, the IID began a new tradition of dedicating one semester per term to a particularly sensitive issue. We began with Prospects for Peace, a forum, a 6-person series, which sought to look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from a variety of perspectives. When word got out that this topic was on our radar for the fall, people of all politicized opinions or no politicized opinions on the issue were worried for us. There were many nice moments where we heard, "Oh, really?" generally followed by a well-intended, "Well, I hope it's really great, and that you know what you're doing." And we did too. It was scary asking people to come together and talk about something so tough. And if I'm being honest, I was probably the most scared out of the IID organizers. I worried we might do more harm than good by asking people to come together. I was being really Dutch Canadian about the whole thing, actually. Happily, though, I was proved wrong. And the truth that if they are approached from a sensitive, balanced, and moderate perspective, our discussions of our important issues can carry the day. I have no trouble standing here and singing the praises of Prospects for Peace or the IID because these have nothing to do with me or the other student organizers. The success lies with the IID community, individuals who give up their own time to come and hear new ideas and to be challenged. They are people like you. That Prospects for Peace was well attended shows that if a space is created for pluralized dialogue, people will embrace it. And in a way, I think they'll also embrace each other. Throughout the series, the audience was much the same, and I hope it's not too trite to say that I think we grew together. There were tense moments, sure, but there were also moments of laughter and even fatigue, and that's okay. By coming together and practicing, the audience became noticeably less charged, and Prospects for Peace became a safer place for us all to be. The images playing behind me are posters from the most recent of IID events. Each one is representative of a dialogue where you have about 100 people coming with 100 different lived contexts. You add in the chance to learn something new, and times that by the amount of events in a series, which is about 14, and you've created virtually thousands of instances of collective growth. And that, to me, is change and safety. This winter, the IID is continuing its pursuit of multi-angled dialogue in a forum on India-Pakistan relations, and I hope that you will come practice with us. Now, the IID is great, but I know that it is not the be-all and end-all, which is why I've also left room and included images of discussion chairs for your thoughts and your ideas. What will you discuss, and what will you lead? Whatever you choose, I hope that what I've said today has been helpful, but more than anything, I hope that it has encouraged you to be brave, because we need each other. It's only together, I believe, that we can condemn the one-sided discussion to the dustbin and work together to create and expect access to speaker events which reflect the gray and the complexity of issues. In preparation for today, I asked a friend of mine if what I had just said made any sense. And she said, well, yeah. As university students, we are expected to write papers which speak to difference all the time. We can fail if we are one-sided, uninformed, rash. And this could be on a paper, on a play of Shakespeare's. So why should our most sensitive and most important dialogues be held to any less rigorous standards? I said, good point, can I use that? The necessary prerequisite to an improvement in our domestic security is a public that can talk about sensitive issues. The less alien such issues feel, the more likely it is that Canadians will not come to hold radical or fear-based opinions. If moderate voices lead the discussion today, it will not be so easy for the Canadian hair-wielders to come along and whip up a frenzy of pointed nationalisms should an unfortunate moment occur. We may not agree, but that's not the goal. The goal is to practice and to always listen to one another. The less we feel threatened by the words of others, the safer we are. Thank you very much.